Welcome, everyone. I'm Julia Grove. I'm the Director of Marketing at OneRail. And welcome to joining our webinar on Stretch Your Last Mile Capacity, Win Q4 with Tools, Innovation, and AI. A quick housekeeping note, the webinar will run for about 45-minute discussion with our panel, and then we'll allow for 15 minutes Q&A at the end. So if you have questions during the webinar, please write them in the chat and we'll make note of those and address them down at the end during the Q&A. Thank you. And so now I'd like to introduce our founder and CEO, Bill Catania, as our webinar host.
Hello, everybody. Bill Catania here. Thanks, Julia. Capacity is always top of mind, and we're going to talk a lot about last mile capacity today and how you can improve that with data science, with tech-connected, tech-forward logistics partners like Bunge. We have perspective coming to us from Fortune 500 shipper with Dean Dutton from Advance Auto Parts. So, some of you may have received a gift in the mail, and just to get in the spirit of, stretching capacity, we sent out a few of these Stretch Armstrong toys. So had a little fun with that, all branded, of course, to our webinar. And, sometimes your capacity looks like this. You want it to look more like this. I don't think I can break them if I wanted to, but that's what you want, right? You want that elasticity. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And, capacity is a lot more than just having wheels and axles in the right place. It's about having the right type of wheels and axles in the right place at the right time for the right product, for the right SLA, to develop and execute the right experience for the customer. And so we have some great people on the panel today. I'm going to start off. I'm going to introduce real briefly each person, but I'd like them to then talk about themselves a little bit, what they do in their role and how capacity is important to them. So David Dashler, we'll start with you. David was the first CTO here at OneRail. He was responsible for lines of code 1 to 4 million. We're now beyond that. And a couple months ago, David took over a really exciting role as our EVP of data science and analytics. So David, if you don't mind talking a little bit about what you do, what your day-to-day is, and then we'll move on to Dean.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, so my job now is to take all the massive amounts of data and information that we have, mix that in a good stew with the human experience, and then kind of come up with models, both we can call machine learning and artificial intelligence models that can help us make better decisions. And that's what I'm here for. And so we've been building a lot of stuff internally. I'm sure some of it will come up, as well as what we've been using for quite a while. And so glad to be here. And I'm glad to be speaking with the rest of the panelists too. This is awesome.
Thanks a lot, David. David gets to work on the cool, shiny stuff is what he's trying to say. Yep. Thank you. And one thing, we'll get into this a bit as we talk about the topic, but we've been using AI at OneRail for 3 years. This isn't a new topic for David. We have a self-learning platform, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but we're getting about a 71-to-1 operating leverage in terms of human capital, if you will, that we use to manage deliveries. So David will get into that as we talk further. Dean Dutton is a very important and special person to OneRail. Dean has been a customer of ours for several years now. Dean runs last mile operations and analytics. He's the director of transportation at Advance Auto Parts. And we've really enjoyed the partnership and appreciate you being able to share some of your learnings today and your experience with capacity in the last mile.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. Appreciate you having me. Really good content and conversation to be had at this meeting. So looking forward to sharing, answering questions as well. A little bit of my background, been with Advance for about 7 years. My career has been in logistics and transportation in different verticals, from manufacturing to trade show to and different types of companies, air freight, LTL, integration. So really seen a lot, but my passion was really in that customer experience, right? And by saying that, how do you customize that experience for the customer based on what they want, what they need, and how do you consume that and execute on it? So, one of the things that I discovered here at Advance is, we are focused on the customer. That is the pinnacle and North Star for us, right? And so how do we execute with what we have, right? Our internal fleet, But then how do we expand that value proposition to that customer by expanding the capability, the capacity, capacity with a lot of details, and the service opportunities, right? So, through the partnership with OneRail, we've found some ways to do that and really improve that customer experience, improve the way our stores operate, improve that connectivity and that stickiness, both to internal customers and external customers. So really excited to kind of share some of that as we kind of walk through this little journey here today. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Dean, for today and for the partnership. We appreciate that very much. And Carrie Thurston. Carrie is the Chief Financial Officer of Bunge. And, I've said this a million times. If it wasn't for us having tremendous logistics partners, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. We took the approach from day one, once we really focused on how we wanted to serve this industry, of having a really advanced platform, but that platform lives and dies really on the network that's on top of it. And we're really proud to call Bunge a logistics partner of ours. They're a strategic partner as we continue to serve our customers, and that's something that's very special to us. We think about our logistics partners almost like we think about our own team members. So Carrie, we appreciate you being here with us today. There's a lot of perspective that you'll be able to bring. Bunge is one that really sets itself apart, I think, on customer experience and quality, and I would love to hear a bit more about your journey that led you here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, thank you, Bill, and to the OneRail team for inviting us to participate today. I have been at Bunge for about 9 months, but I had the pleasure of meeting the founders, Ben and Harrison, back in 2016. When they launched Bunge, and have followed their journey over the past 6 years and watched them make a major pivot in their business model, which is oftentimes what's required when you're a young, entrepreneurial, nimble company, and have really been excited to be part of the hyper growth that the company is experiencing. Part of it driven by partnering with great people like OneRail and other enterprise partners across the country. But Bunge's likewise focused on customer service, and it shows through in our 87 NPS score nationwide, which really just harkens back to the quality of the driver network that we've been able to create and the platform that those drivers and our customers are utilizing to make that happen. So look forward to diving into how we're using innovation and AI to make that happen. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Carrie, very much. Really looking forward to that perspective. And, as we jump in, Dean, we'll start with you. As a retailer who has their own internal fleet, and if I recall, Advance has somewhere in the neighborhood of 13,000 delivery vehicles. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's pretty right. Yep.
Pretty good sized fleet. How do you balance internal and external capacity? Because I'm sure you have times where your network is under almost 100% load at certain times of the day, and then maybe there's not much load at all because it's later in the day. How do you balance capacity and utilization both internally and externally? Would love your perspective.
Yeah, sure. Good question. And honestly, we were at any given time over my time here, we were somewhere between 6th and 10th largest private fleet in the U.S. Right? So owned fleet. So that's a lot of wheels on the ground and a lot of people, moving parts. But to your point, we had opportunities to look at after hours, weekends, kind of that extended service window, because our customers demanded it, right? So they were really looking at how do I get it where your competition can't get the parts. So through that, and then being able to implement third party as a kind of a backup or at least an augmented delivery service, we were able to stretch that capacity, which was really benefits the customer. The other part is, we look at the balancing of that fleet, right? So we have stores that change model, right, or change volume with seasonality. Their specialty, their customer bases might shift and geographically move around. So we look at how we also balance moving those those fleet assets, those invested assets around the geography. And so the flexibility, one, from the data that we understand and we receive from our delivery platform and from other sources, allows us to be very prescriptive around that. But also, it's kind of a backstop. I use the name as a backstop. So a third party allows us to have that safety, that security net, right? So the flexing, which could optically seem really hard to do, becomes a lot easier, right? And so over the last couple of years, as we've been working with OneRail and learning how to do that, learning more, we've become much better at it. We've matured, right? We've built the muscle on how to do that, and it's not as much as a delayed reaction as a proactive move now. So that's one thing that we really do to try to balance that out. And it goes from planning. The question was, how do I plan for it? Well, I used to have to try to plan for it. Now the speed of data allows me to be, prescriptive and proactive, like I mentioned, and really see it coming and work ahead of the wave. So that's kind of how we approach it.
That's great perspective. And I do have a little follow-up question there. So I'm sure we have a few folks in the audience today that have their own fleets, that this would mean a lot to. What are maybe 2 examples of triggers or thresholds that you would set in the platform, or that you would set as business rules that would say, this one should be a third party delivery versus an internal fleet delivery?
There's capacity triggers. So we know who from our internal fleet, either vehicles or people, are online, right? So we see their activities occurring, and the intelligence of the platform and the threshold you could say is, hey, is this driver close enough to the pickup to recover it and then get to the customer, the end customer within the SLA, right? The required SLA. So the intelligence and the rules and the timings you put into the system allow for the system to do that, right? And so that would be hey, we don't have the ability to do it internally. We have to look to an external source, right? And that again becomes automated. So that's one of the things that we look at. We look at transactions by time of day, right? So we know we're pretty solid. I mean, again, it's very predictable in our transactions per time of day, but we can also see when there's a spike, right? We might know something is going on. There might be, there might be traffic influence. There might be, there might be a sales promotion that we're doing, right? And we know that particular store is going to go crazy in that, and so we can see, we can see that occur as well. So again, part of the being ahead of that curve, we're kind of looking out over the tips of the skis to be able to do that. But there's really, within the platform, there are a lot of parameters you can set, and it becomes customizable not only to the general business, but ultimately we can get to the point where we can start building customer profiles, and it's one of the things that's very important. So if we're even that far ahead, knowing the details and the characteristics of a specific customer, and preload that or have that as guiding data or guiding information, again, flows through, creates a better experience for the customer. So that's a couple of ways.
Yeah, that last point you made is really fundamental. And we're living in an era where how we execute supply chain and logistics technology has an overlap with shopper marketing in a really significant way, and in a way that it never has before. And that's an interesting point, because that's something I've seen. My previous company was in the shopper marketing space. It was a MarTech play, and there's a lot of talk about omnichannel, but there wasn't a whole lot of doing when it came to the execution on the ground. We could synchronize shopper messaging. You could put together shopper targeting, segmentation, and strategies, but to be able to follow through with a logistics offering was really, really hard. So good point that you drove home there. So Carrie, you and the Bungie team have a difficult task. I could tell you that because we started this journey before we were OneRail. We were similar to Bungie. We were a tech forward courier. We built our own network. We realized that people like Bungie were doing a better job, quite frankly, and we decided we would get back to what we were really good at, which is focusing 100% on technology and partnering with people who did a great job building tech-connected courier networks. So I know one of the challenges I always had, and I'll be honest, I think the big guys like Uber and Lyft haven't totally figured it out either. But how do you go about forecasting for capacity when you're building a network, a living, breathing network? That's not easy. And I'm sure you have a role in that, even from a finance perspective and just a planning perspective. I would imagine there's a significant component there too.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely utilizing AI to drive predictive analytics that look at geo level information, day of the week, time blocks during the day, partner level information to really predict and determine the supply needs that we're going to have within the network. And when we talk about supply, we're talking about driver availability, someone who can show up within the next 2 hours and get a large item off the retail floor away from the distribution center to allow those customers, those enterprise partners to clear floor space. The good news for us is today we're servicing over 50 US metros with 10,000 certified drivers. So we have proven that we can build that network, and then we can quickly flex it up to meet seasonal demand. And seasonal demand for us looks like holiday demand, as we're all anticipating going into the fourth quarter. But we've got some major partners, some of them via our relationship at OneRail that are in home improvement, focused on building contractor deliveries. So we also see seasonality through the summer build season. So utilizing that base of 10,000 certified drivers in our 50 metros, we can get a new driver through the funnel from application to delivering in a single day. And at the same time, we aren't willing to compromise against the quality or reliability or professionalism of those drivers. So we're taking them through all the safety checks. We're looking at the equipment they're going to utilize, looking at it via pictures, but we are getting a good understanding of how they're going to be able to safely execute against the Bungie mission. And then from a geo perspective, we also are able to launch new geographies within 30 days, less than a month, probably honestly within 2 or 3 weeks, though my COO would probably tell me not to say that out loud. Josh is probably cringing in the office right now. But we don't put any people on the ground in a new geo. We just launch into our social networking campaigns to recruit drivers. And we've found those to be extremely effective. We've had good luck with Facebook. And then there's a viral nature to what we do. We've had TikTok videos that have become viral where drivers are like, you want an amazing shared economy driving experience, go drive for Bungie. They pay you well, the app is easy to use. So all the things kind of work together to allow us to flex up and then outside of seasonality periods, flex down a bit. But to be honest, those are times when our drivers who are doing it part-time aren't looking for the extra income either. So it's been great to get that capacity built to the level it is today and then see how flexible and elastic it really is.
That's phenomenal. And again, the fact that I remember the initial press release when Bungie announced that it existed. And that was, I think it was 2016, about the time I started this journey too. And I'll be honest with you, for every 10 companies that sent one of those press releases out, I think there might be one still operating today, maybe. I would say there's been hundreds of companies that have tried to do this. And I can count on one hand just about the number that have been able to scale. So you're doing something great there. Data is now the next evolution of driving that efficiency, and it's real clear you're harnessing that. So good stuff. Data Dave, I'll call you Data Dave Dashler. Question for you on data and AI. So, what would you say? I mean, look, you built this platform that we have, and a lot of people wonder where the name Rail comes from, and that always causes interesting conversation at trade shows. How are we using the railroad to perfect the last mile? And then, of course, my background was in it was a marketing tech that worked in the fintech space, And so we call the payment infrastructure that carries data in and out of a store from the point of sale, the payment rail. It's called the rail. And when you think about swiping a credit card, you swipe the credit card. There's about 8 transactions that happen in less than a second, maybe a second round trip. And you don't think about it, right? You swipe your credit card and it just happens. You don't think about all those handshakes that happen. You don't think about the application of rules to the transaction. You don't think about the governance, right? Quite frankly, the data security layer that sits over the top of it. You just want the receipt to print or send to your phone and so you can leave. You want to see the little word approved on the payment terminal. So that's how we envisioned delivery. That's how David and I, when we had our first ever whiteboarding session, that was the tendency that we used when we architected this. So here we are, 4 years later, David, 4.5 million lines of code later. Tell us, if you would, what are several outcomes now that we have all this data? Maybe a couple things that are focused on efficiency and a couple things that are focused on growth relative to machine learning and AI. I think that would be great.
Yeah, first, I think it's interesting talking about, swiping the credit card and just have things work, right? I think where we're trying to head is where you don't even have to swipe the credit card. It knows that you wanted to buy that thing already, and it's got the information it needs to make those things happen, right? And so that's the direction that we're headed in. And so right now, when we've applied machine learning, artificial intelligence to delivery, what we find is an improvement in efficiency and accuracy, right? And so when we're talking about customer experience, we definitely want packages to get where they're going undamaged and get there on time. And, it can't cost the end customer $1,000 to do for a, $5 package that they're waiting for. And so what we did was we took all machine learning learns from patterns in humans, right? Even GPT and large language models are actually analyzing language, and they're figuring out which letters and which words go after one after another inside a given context, right? And so when we apply that to what we do here, what we came up with was one of the first applications was our LP ranking algorithm. And what that did was we took a look at what our dispatchers were doing. And there was a bunch of them. There's not too many more than there were now, which is really great, than there are now, which is good. And we said, what are the decision factors that are really going to create a positive experience? And we set out and created what is essentially a reinforcement learning algorithm that goes out and makes deliveries and figures out the reward signals. The reward signals are the package is on time, the package cost was within boundaries, all of these things. And that algorithm determines how to actually get how to get things moving and for the best price and stuff that's actually going to make it on time. And because of that, it means a lot less human intervention. So if you think of what we're doing versus how we used to do it, there was a bunch of people kind of monitoring screens and looking at all these packages and things floating around. Well, when we have right now, there's billions of internal data transactions going on every month, right? If you had people staring at screens doing that right now, we would just have a building full of people staring at screens. It wouldn't be very efficient. So when you apply machine learning to something, it has to learn from those people staring at screens in some way, labeled data or their actions or something, and then produce good outputs. And so we found definitely efficiency savings there, cost savings, because we don't need to hire, one person to manage each delivery that's going out. Even though we're on, hundreds of different LP networks, courier networks, we can manage those all from a centralized way. And most of what has to be done with packages now here at OneRail is done automatically. It's making decisions on when we should take something away, when we should give it to somebody else to try to carry it, all kinds of things. And so I think that and coupling it with what Dean was talking about earlier, routing and simulation, right? Like using artificial intelligence to determine when and what is the best path for somebody to take, and when is somebody going to be available based on not just static times, but things that move around a lot too. There's constantly drivers going all over the place, and we're getting lots and lots of geo points back from Advanced Auto Parts and all their drivers. It's a raining geo points, right? So we're figuring out where everybody is, and then making good determinations based on history and what works to go ahead and try to make sure we assign the right people to the job. So whether that's trying to turn my light on, sorry, whether that's an Advanced Auto Parts driver, or if they're not available, we're making the most efficient decisions possible. And, also understanding when to use different modes, right? Comparing everybody can say, oh, we'll do a delivery in 3 hours or same day or whatever, but what if historically they're not, right? Like, and so we can compare what is being promised to the end customer with what we're executing and make sure that, hey, can this go in a different mode possibly? Can we do this more efficiently? Can this go on a route? Can this go parcel? Can this go somewhere else? And so also using data that we have to make those decisions dynamically as well. And again, more efficiencies and cost savings and more accurate prediction of when things are going to be late or not. And so a lot of our tooling that we're rolling out also has to do with making sure the customer's informed when our artificial intelligence algorithms are making determinations that it's looking like, despite our best effort, this one might be late. We can go ahead and reach out proactively. And so just lots of work in that space. And so it's really improving the experience, the efficiency and the accuracy of all of our deliveries internally at OneRail.
Yeah, and David, just to put numbers to something you said, you talked a little bit about the efficiency of how many deliveries we manage. For those that don't know, we actually manage the deliveries from our headquarters here in Orlando. We have about 40 people, and that's all they do. They're watching control towers. They're managing exceptions. They're not dispatching anything because that's automated. But day one, when we turned the platform on, one person could manage 80 deliveries a day. And today, one person can manage 3,500 deliveries a day. And that's a testament to AI. There's no other way to get that kind of efficiency gain than a self-learning platform that really understands when to dispatch and to whom and where, right? It's basically what we're doing. David, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. When we launched day one in the United States, we had no data, right? There was no data whatsoever. We find ourselves in the same position right now with Canada and the UK. So here we are, we have a bunch of data, but now we're dealing with different courier networks. We're dealing with different countries, right? Different regulatory constraints, different data privacy and security constraints. Can you give a little insight to how the learnings from the United States could translate to launches in other countries now that we've built that network and we have no data on it? We're in the process of actually turning it on. How do we get gains immediately?
That is a data scientist's worst nightmare, but it's not the end of the world. So we love when we actually have representative data, or at least where we can correlate something to produce outcomes that, hey, we think that we're going to be about 98% successful in this area. Here's some things that we have to do. We can do that now with any area near or where we have been in the United States. What we would do is generate similarities in rural and metros. Get some data on, it would definitely involve a little bit of manual work to grab some transportation data and things in areas where we haven't been yet, but combine that with our data sets and models to inform them about what we call when we're doing a new regression model or any data science classification model, they're called the predictors, right? What are the predictors that are going to tell us how the outcomes are going to be, right? And so when we get enough of those predictors, if we can gather that data and related predictors from other areas that we haven't been to yet, we can combine that with our models and give them something like, it's not exactly, but hey, model, this looks like this. So in these areas, tell us based on what we know, what would happen, right? And we know it's not going to be as good as what we have and when we have gotten exact answers back from our data, but it's going to be better than just flipping a coin, right? And a lot better in a lot of cases. And so we grab that representative data, those representative predictors for the different metro markets and areas, put it all together, run it through our models and see what comes out, and then use that to make an informed decision in a new space.
Yeah, that's great. So basically, if this scenario looks like this scenario, then we're going to plan for this to be the baseline. And then from there, the anomalies happen and we start learning.
Exactly. Process. Yeah. And then we execute deliveries rather rapidly. So we're able to collect thousands of rows. And most of the algorithms that we're using right now, you get a good 10 to 20,000 rows of data and you got something, right? And so for us, we can do that rather quickly in these new areas. And then we can use that to quickly refine, retrain, improve, and redeploy any of the models that we're using to do decisions. And so that's what we would do and rapidly improve, right? So every day that goes by and every bit of data that we get more, use that, recompute, and try again. Let's do better.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Let's talk about differentiation for a second. Something that Dean taught me very early in our relationship blew my mind about the auto parts space, that a repair shop, we'll just keep it generic, a repair shop needs parts. They need those parts quickly. And sometimes they'll put an order in through multiple either distributors or retailers, and whichever one gets there first gets the sale. And if you don't get there first, not only do you not get the sale, you have to now put that part back through a reverse process. So if you don't mind sharing just a little bit about how you think about differentiation and how you feel you've made some gains, maybe some, where you see even future improvements around how you can further differentiate. I think that was fascinating to me. I had no idea that that's how it worked.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's challenging in our world is you've got a 30-minute window, right? And that's an unbelievable SLA, right? A lot of people talk in context of hours, days, next days, and that type of thing. Our customers need parts. They need them quickly. And the example we always use is a mother who has her car in a shop, who needs to get it in, get it out, and get back to her day, right? And taking care of her family and all that. So that's a big deal. So we think of it that way from our customers' perspective. So it's two things. One, the reliability and the kind of repetitiveness of an experience for that customer. We commit 30 minutes. Clearly, there's factors that kind of move that around a little bit. And then there's different demands that change that as well. But we kind of commit to that 30-minute. And so what we've been able to do is just become more consistent, right? Trust is a huge component of that. And as you become more consistent and as you can prove that, you prove it day over day, week over week, month over month, then those conversations with our customers become significantly different. You move from a first call, second call, third call, from a third call to a first call, which might have been inventory driven before, but then it becomes reliability of parts in hand. And so, moving up that chain within your competition of first call is huge. So I think that's a big thing, right? It's the consistency, the reliability, the experience of the customer that starts driving that growth and that revenue, and that's what we're always looking for. It's high competition out there. It really is. It is a funny story it's a race sometimes. Everything else being even, it can be a race. So that's one of the things that's kind of been a differentiator as we've kind of started to expand our capacity and our elasticity relative to windows of delivery, and be able to exercise the use of a third party. I kind of flip back. I'm thinking through what David said and kind of the AI part, right? So I want to stitch a few things together. I mentioned the data allows us to kind of become proactive, right? And prescriptive with the way that we approach our customers, how they become different. And I think in the context of maybe this webinar, we're kind of a logistically minded group, right? But one of the things David and I talked about a couple months ago, and it's very true, is it's the influence and the predictors that you avail to other organizations. And internally for us is, we know how many parts we sell. We know what types of parts we sell. We know the velocity at a store level. But it's one thing more to know, to be able to bring another predictor, is how fast do we deliver them? What time of day do we deliver them, down to a SKU level? And using that as an additional predictor in a lot of the modeling we do in the merchant side or the inventory side or the upstream supply chain side. So that's another thing that we've gotten window into. We had a little bit of it early when I got here when we were doing some of this on our own, but we accelerated it tremendously over the last 2 years. So AI is part of our conversation here at Advance. We do modeling, we do in different capacities in different organizations. But AI is a very broad term as well, right? So, how does it become valuable to you? How does it become valuable to your organization? Understanding a little bit and breaking it down, to David's point, it's not a silver bullet, right? It's just added color to the artwork. We're all trying to create a really beautiful piece of artwork in the way we operate, and the more color you have, probably the better it's going to be, right? So that's kind of the way I think about stitching those things together and how it goes beyond just logistics, right, or the last mile. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, definitely some good dots to connect. And good thing it's a race because you have a checkered flag in your logo. So
That's right.
Nobody else has that. That's
Bill, if I could just build a little bit off of something David mentioned while he was chatting, he talked about pulling orders back from your logistics providers. And one of the things that we have found is our inputs are not only about the deliveries we can complete, but they're about the deliveries that we missed, that we didn't match, that we rejected because they were outside of a geo, and really utilizing that to understand how to quickly flex up to meet the demands of OneRail, right? And that was one of the big things we focused on when we spent time with you all in Orlando, and part of our weekly conversation internally is how do we ensure that we can capture 100% of what OneRail sends our way and do it efficiently with professional drivers.
Well, I got to say, Carrie, and I think that's part of our differentiation together,
Right.
is that collaboration. You know, the best partnerships we have are collaborative, where we'll share data with you. We'll share some of the data so you can see where those gaps are, and you also do the same for us. And we're doing it all for the customer. At the end of the day, if our customer and our customer's customer are happy, then it all works. And I really appreciate you highlighting that. That's a key part of the process. And that's not necessary, a data's part of it, but that's really human interaction and collaboration, backed with some really good data and decision making. Yeah. Something that, Carrie, that would be really good, along the lines of differentiation. There's still, a ton of shippers that are using maybe a more traditional courier that is not tech connected. They don't have an app. They're not trackable. They're not traceable. Maybe they're managing that in Excel or by phone or by email. I'd love it if you could maybe just compare and contrast a little bit just how big the gap is by not having a partner like Bungie.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't bring a ton of industry experience. So my experience is focused on the best in class offering that Bungie has. But I can tell you some of the things we do today and some of the things that we're going to continue to build upon. So route optimization. I mean, we talk about traffic, we talk about urban density, but on top of that, there are weather aspects, right? So when Dean was talking about things that impact ability to deliver, weather has been extremely unpredictable across the United States. So making that part of the route optimization process and thinking about that within our routing algorithms is something that we're building up on right now. Real-time tracking exists, ability for everyone within our networked group. So our orchestration platform partners, the original shipper, the end customer, ability to see the progress of that delivery exists today, but enhancing the ability to communicate directly with those folks and let them know this delivery is running 10 minutes late is, something that we continue to capitalize on. And then also being able to predict when a driver is going to complete their current delivery. So we know a lot about when they'll get there, but there's also the unload aspect of that. Is the customer ready to receive the order? If it's going between two distribution centers, are we going to immediately get a door that we're able to enter through? So continuing to build out our ability to utilize that unload data to know when that driver can next be expected for their next pickup. So can we agree that they should match to the next 2-hour delivery window? So really just trying to capitalize across the board on all those data points that are getting fed into the system.
Yeah, it sounds like it's efficiency, it's quality, it's speed, it's visibility, and the fact that you can actually see where your order is. We call it the WISMO call. If you don't have that tracking, where is my order? WISMO. We love acronyms. So yeah, all great points, Carrie. I couldn't imagine, being a shipper that's really trying to execute, especially high volume delivery, without having that technology in place. I couldn't even fathom it in 2023. David, something that would be interesting to dive into a little bit, and there's probably a lot of people who haven't really executed an AI strategy, a machine learning or AI strategy yet. What would be a few words of advice, if it's a shipper, if it's a courier, or anybody in between, how would you suggest, what's the first step? Like, how do you even, it sounds intimidating. How do you get involved in this game and transition and transform into a data-driven business that has an AI element. And it may be just a little bit too, the differentiation between analytics and AI. I think that it's almost like how the word omni-channel got thrown around for a long time. Big data, analytics, AI, it's the same thing, right?
So always start with, it's like any other product that you're going to build for yourself, right? Like always start with your biggest pain points. Where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck in the least amount of time? Start there. You may not be able to know the second half of that until you actually get into the tooling and really understanding, but you want to start with where you have problems and where there's a natural level of unpredictability, right? That's what these tools do. They're trying to quantify unpredictability. There's always noise in the system in the real world. Like we can fit things into a box and say, here, this is definitely going to cost between here and here and try to quantify everything. But the real world messes with us. It's like Carrie was saying, the storm happens and then like you're in trouble, right? You didn't know that was going to happen. Now everything got missed. You could have predicted it if you plugged into a weather system or something and they said something was coming in. As far as like how to get started on it, that's probably the number one. Make sure you're solving the right problem. And then difference between analytics and AI is applied analytics, right? So like internally, like when we're talking about building, let's say regression models, deep learning models, or that kind of thing, we're talking about taking a whole lot of data that somebody's labeled. Either your systems have labeled it. Let's say we want to know if something's going to be late or not late, right? We've labeled a bunch of deliveries. We have a bunch of what we call predictors, things that we think are able to make that delivery late or on time, things like mileage and stuff like that. We've labeled all these rows, and now we feed that into an algorithm that goes and tries to pick apart and figure out what pieces of those things and combinations of those things and everything else are causing the late and on time labels to happen, right? And so you have that. Once you have that model, it becomes actionable. But before that, you're having to do the data analytics to really discover, well, why? Like, what should my predictors be? Which ones are causing the variance? Which ones are, going to tell me give me the biggest signal, right? There's a lot of noise. You're trying to pull the signal out of it. And so analytics are good for humans. Taking the analytics and plugging them back into a computer is where you get machine learning, artificial intelligence, and execution by the computer is really what you're looking for. You don't want people to have to look at a heat map and go, well, let's do something over here because whatever. You want the computer to look at the heat map and go, I'm going to do something now. And that's the difference between the application and just analyzing the data. Analyze the data and then do something with it, execute upon it. So,
so go ahead, David. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, some of the stuff that we're doing here, what I found most interesting is just some tips and advice. When you're building models and you finally get the model right, you start to see outliers. The outliers have been probably the number one most useful thing for us, because even though the outliers had nothing to do with the model you were trying to build, you just learned a lot about your business, right? You just learned where things are way outside of the norm for you and what you can do about that and how do you operationalize that. In your business, there's going to be a whole lot of areas for application of this stuff. It's not hard to do. You got to have the right people and the right data, right? It's not an impossible thing to do, but all of these things, there's tools out there for your use. If you got the right people on them and using them, you don't have to go and spend $1 billion on a GPU farm somewhere and go train a deep learning model. As a matter of fact, like most of what you're going to do, unless it has a lot of data with it, like if it's images or sound or something like that, deep learning might not even do as good of a job. You probably don't have enough data to feed deep learning, enough for it to even beat some of the more classical methods. So definitely take a look at your data, try to figure out where your top pain points are, and then make sure you got enough data. And step -1 before step 0 is make sure you're collecting data. If you're not, go ahead and start getting it now because you're going to want it for the future. So I think that would probably be my biggest, the biggest thing from this for sure.
Great, David. Thank you. All right. Well, I think Julia's turning on her screen here.
Yeah.
We're going to jump into some QA. Hopefully we have some great questions to challenge our panel today.
Okay, so panelists, where do you see AI being like the most common use case in your strategy? Like, how do you think about it in terms of how you're gonna? David shared about how OneRail looks at it. How are you using it?
Yeah, for us at Bungie, it's definitely within routing algorithms and the ability to utilize that machine learning aspect of all the things that I kind of mentioned before. Where we're going to be able to drive bigger opportunities for efficiency is with routed multi-stop, as well as routed multi-pickup. So as we're able to utilize the data that's flowing into our network and build out these larger delivery opportunities across multiple pickups and multiple stops, we're going to see efficiencies across the network for everyone involved, including ourselves and our unit economics. So for us, that's a key area of focus. I think the other is the understanding that customers, while oftentimes we talk about same day delivery, and that's probably the most important thing for Dean, for others, the most important thing is flexibility of delivery. So ensuring that we're continuing to build a system that allows for that end receiver to have flexibility to change things. And for us to adapt around those changes within our routing algorithms, within our supply network of drivers as well. So that's for us, the kind of the biggest areas of focus for AI and generation of better and more efficient outcomes over time.
Yeah, and I might have answered a little early in the last part. I look at it beyond just from a logistics perspective right now. If I bring it back in, pardon me, from a delivery perspective, I think Carrie hit a lot of the notes, right? How do you optimize what your drivers are doing, right? How do you make sure that multi-stop, multi-pickup, you're enabling that? What does it look like? How do you address that? We're looking at that. We're absolutely looking at how do we take our internal drivers and enable them to act more like a gig provider, right? How do you untether your assets and your people to it from a traditional out and in kind of delivery system, right? Clearly, that's kind of where we were based and kind of where we started. We've been looking at how to stitch all that together in a way that even with an extended capacity, then how do you blend all that together, right? And there's answers to it, but it lives in the data. It lives in the ability to look at that, become predictable, to model out a lot, right? And then create a starting point, right? One of the things I always say is, it's a place to be wrong from, but not engaging with AI, not engaging with data is going to leave you behind, right? It's going to basically leave you stagnant. And there's a couple of things that we all contend with, right? From a retail perspective, we're in a transformational time. Right? The last decade has been unbelievable, right? And myopically focused on the customer, right? And then your traditional transportation models and transportation providers have drastically changed, right? If you're thinking back, if you're still kind of got one foot in the LTL world, thinking that that's the best way to get your product to a customer, man, I'm sorry, it's something you got to think way ahead of, right? And what it's going to be in 10 years. And if you're not thinking about that, then unfortunately it's not going to be a happy future, I believe, for that retailer or for that company who's not engaged in it. So again, exciting times from my perspective. There's just so much going on. There's so many new opportunities that are being thought through, brought together, baked, cooked, presented, and you just kind of have to come at it with eyes wide open, right? And I think we're only on the tip. We're only on the tip of it. So as long as I'm still in the world, it's going to be an exciting ride for me. And I think even beyond that, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when I'm long gone. So.
I think Dean makes an interesting point, as I was thinking about today's webinar and being here in Kansas City, which has been the longtime home, maybe since their inception of Yellow, of what in town we call YRC, because that was their name for a long time. The bankruptcy is really going to create, it has created an amount of disruption that is hard for the traditional logistics companies, the traditional transportation providers to overcome. But we have made clear to all of our partners, we stand able and ready to offload some of that capacity when it's right for you. And think that with kind of the efficiencies we're driving, that we can get pricing in the right neighborhood to make that reality for people. And the experience is going to be better. So
Thank you all. So another question came in, asked, do you work with factoring companies? If so, who are the best ones to work with?
So, I mean,
This question was from Mona. Mona, if you want to submit, like, I guess, who the question is for Dean or for Terry or for.
no, I can talk to it a little bit. We don't, but in a past life when I owned a trucking company, it was a component of it, right? So cash flow is a huge, something that item that you have to contend with, especially with the volatility of fuel, the increased cost of hard assets, financing for investment in assets. I mean, your cost model can change very quickly. And then there's companies that are stretching out payment terms, right? They want to hold on to their money as long as possible. So when you're considering factoring as part of augmenting your cash flow as a company, there are times when you might have to think about it, right? There are multiple companies out there, and this was a decade ago that I had the experience, so I couldn't point to a specific company, but I'm familiar with it.
This is an interesting question for me. We don't factor our receivables at Bungie, but my former startup was a fintech that is kind of the alternative to factoring, which is the ability to drive early payment with your vendors. Because many of those vendors, though they've stretched out payment terms, they oftentimes have cash on their balance sheet and they actually want to use it. They just want you to pay for it to get it. But they'll often take a much lower rate than a factoring company would. So Mona, I'm happy to connect with you post this webinar, and we can see if I can help you out there with connecting with my former company. They'll love me for that. It's a win-win for me today.
Okay, the other question we got in is, how does OneRail normalize the customer's experience for deliveries on my internal fleet versus a marketplace?
Yeah, David, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So all of our integrations have, everybody has their own idea for what a delivery looks like and the various milestones. But when we do an integration, we kind of normalize internally all the signals coming back from an internal fleet. So what would happen is if you have the technology available internally, we would integrate with your internal systems, and then it would run through, after that was completed, it runs through what we call our CX platform, which kind of you can customize and specify different messages that go out on various like text messages or emails and things like that. And that would control the customer experience from your app. You wouldn't have to change anything. If you're not technology enabled, like your drivers don't have anything, we offer a product called OneRail Driver, and that does all of that automatically. So your drivers carry the app with them while they're doing the deliveries, and that automatically, as they're performing deliveries, even they don't even have to touch anything. A lot of times it's just doing geofencing and discovering where they're at. We'll send updates to the customer, let them know when their package is on its way, if it's running late and all that kind of stuff. And so it either comes with an integration with a system, or you can utilize our technology, and it all comes with it. And all that goes through the OneRail core platform and becomes normalized.
Okay, we've got two more questions in, both of which are pertain to capacity. So the first one is, how does greater capacity impact product availability? And a follow-up to that is, how important is convenience to a modern consumer?
I mean, from my perspective, it's what capacity are we speaking to, right? Capacity to deliver is great. Product placement becomes the constraint, right? So if you have the capacity to deliver, but you don't have the product to deliver, that's going to waste your capacity. So it goes back through the supply chain, right? I mean, you have to have kind of an orchestrated and very tightly bound offering in place, right? And you have to think about how you're deploying, where's your inventory at, how far forward are you going to deploy that inventory? How much is your, what is the impact and where does that capacity draw from a fulfillment node perspective in my mind? Capacity is always good to have. It's kind of like Linus's blue blanket, right? You want it, you want to make sure you got it there. You want to feel comfortable with it. But you also don't want to be wasteful in doing it. So it's a bit of a balance.
Okay, and another question for you, Dean, on capacity is regarding capacity triggers. Appreciate the proximity and time of day. How much weight or factor is placed on price?
So say that in a different way. Ask that question again.
They're want to knowing about like they appreciate proximity and time of day in terms of capacity triggers, but how much of a factor is it based on price?
We negotiate well, so our price is pretty flat across all providers. I mean, it's nominal variance in that. So it's kind of a non-factor from a pricing perspective, from a price per delivery perspective. And even in that, right, again, like I mentioned earlier, our focus is the customer, right? If we satisfy the customer and they're happy and we have good, reliable, repeatable experience, that's key, right? Because we're thinking top line, right? Because it's going to drive sales, really drive that. Gosh, that's what I'm looking for. Anyway, drive their trust in us. So unless there's some sort of significant variance in price, it becomes a very low component of the algorithm I'm thinking of. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's all the questions we got in. Oh, sorry, there's one more question that just came in. Will there be contact information again? I'd like to connect with Carrie regarding my question. Yes, we can connect you. Yeah, okay. So thank you so much, everyone. We've gotten all the questions in now, and I think we're about time. I don't know, Bill, if there's anything you want to wrap up for everyone.
No, I think that's a wrap. And I just want to thank our panelists today and for your time and your insight. And especially everybody that tuned in. It was great to have your questions, and hopefully you were able to gain some knowledge that you can take back. No matter if you're a shipper, a courier, an analyst, we get all kinds of different types of participants in these webinars. And if your question wasn't answered today, you can always reach out. Julia, how would somebody reach out if they have a follow-up question today?
They can email us at info@onerail.io.
Great. So email info@onerail.io. We can route that if it's not something David or I can answer to either Dean or Carrie. And again, thank you very much. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.